Welcome to the Intentional Guy Podcast, where we are driven to help men become more intentional and purposeful in their daily lives. Your host, Michael Chestnut, will interview amazing guests to get insight and glean wisdom from, so we can integrate intentional living and lead happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. All right, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Michael Chestnut, your host on Intentional Guy, and I am here with Nico Lagan. Nico, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I got to watch some of your videos and
you weren't too irritated by it? You were okay?
No.
It didn't piss you off too much?
No, not at all. So,
Yeah.
the one thing that I like is on Intentional Guy, I like authentic conversations where we can I grew up a preacher's kid, and I knew every mask to wear for everybody. I knew to be what you wanted me to be. I could, and so what I did was I grew up being a great chameleon, and unfortunately I had to lose everything in my life to learn real truth and real value, and to also even know who God was. I had this whole totally different image of who God was, and I was a pastor's kid, even with the seminary, So anyways, I brought you on here. You have a great story. I love stories. People's stories enrich our lives when we can learn from them. And so, I'd like to kind of open it up to you, share a little bit about your story with my audience here.
Which part? My story's been going on for a long time. I've been living a different life since I can remember. I think about this all the time, that I've probably lived 3 lifetimes already, and I'm barely 41. I've always done what I felt like doing, but I always thought it was instinct. For the longest time, I thought I had great instincts, and I just came to realize that I'm just doing God's work. I'm just doing whatever God's telling me to do. I just listen. I've always had a very good connection with God. I've always had faith, but I did not. I had faith in my instincts, but I didn't realize until the past year that it was God all along that was speaking to me. My instinct is that's a word that we use when we don't understand how connected we are to God. So,
right. Yeah.
So it depends. Where do you want to go back? Because we can go back at 14. We can go back 4 years ago. We can go back 12 years ago.
Well, tell us about your journey.
Every few years, I tend to reinvent what I do, or just niche it down. Maybe it's a better word to say it. So, this whole masculinity thing started when my dad left. Was 14. I'm 41. So you're looking at about 27 years, 26 years now. And, Steve Harvey says something along the lines, I'm going to bastardize it again, but he says that when a father leaves his son, he leaves a hole in his soul in his shape. So there is something, the boy's always going to miss something. There's always going to be a hole in his soul that needs to be filled. And it's interesting because this is exactly what happened to me. I was in a situation when my dad left, not that he was already very present by the time he left, but when he left, they kind of unconsciously sent me on a path of looking for other men. Because men are meant to be around other men. Men are, I say this all the time, but boys are born, men are made through trials and tribulations. And if you want to become a good man, you're going to have to work for it. It's something that you become. It's not something that you are. You become a good man. And for millennia, men were taught how to become men through rites of passages. And most of the time it started at home with the father. And I did not have that. And I did not have any rites of passages either. There was nobody around my family that was a good man, that was ready to take on what it meant to be a mentor. And my mother eventually remarried, but I wasn't listening anymore. Like, she met somebody a couple of years after, and I was gone. Like you weren't convincing me that you knew better than I knew when I was 14 years old. But within a year or so, I was dropping out of high school, doing drugs every day. I was drinking. I was hanging out with all the wrong people. I started selling drugs. I started stealing to pay for my drug habits, and that went on and on for years. It's By the time I was 17, I had moved out of my mom's place. I was living by myself with a friend of mine, and this went on for another 3 or 4 years. So I was on that path for a long time, and it's not until my early 20s that something changed. And it's funny because it all started when my dad left, and it all finished when my mom gave me a call, when she asked me a very simple question: "Are you happy?" And it's one of those questions that doesn't mean much to somebody that's not really thinking about it. If you're not intentional about the question and you just take it, "Are you happy?" It's like me asking you, how you doing?"
Right.
Most people will answer whatever comes up. Yeah, I'm okay, because everybody knows that even if you're not doing okay, nobody cares, right?
Right.
it's, but it's, when somebody asks you, "Are you happy?" and you're really listening to the question and you're in a situation where you're not, deep down, you're not happy. Because to put it into perspective, when she called, it was, I literally am sitting on the floor of my apartment, which I'm getting evicted from, and it was like the third time I was getting evicted in 4 years, because all I did is party. Like, I didn't care about my neighbors, I didn't care about anybody else. I came in when I wanted, I made the noise I wanted,
Yeah.
and I was getting evicted. I was sitting on the floor with my boxed all my stuff was boxed in, and somehow she called me. It wasn't a coincidence. Like, that's the day I stopped believing in coincidences. Looking back at it today, I see God playing my mother like a marionette, like really just using her as a conduit. Because my mother and I, to this day, we don't have that type of relationship where it's mostly polite. Like, we don't get along on a lot of things because we don't see the world the same way. And back then was the same thing. But when she called, there was no judgment, no nothing. Just, "Are you happy? And if you're not, you can come back home. I don't have the money to pay for your school. You're gonna have to work. You're gonna have to go back to school. You're gonna have to do something. But I can put a roof over your head." And that same night, I moved back to my mother's place, and I stopped doing drugs. I stopped seeing all of my friends. I ditched everybody. I literally, whatever came before that day, I literally cut it off.
Mhm.
I just said no more. Within a couple of years, I had gone back to school. I had graduated from high school. I had a technical college certification, and I was about to start my corporate career. So it's interesting because it all started the day I took accountability for my actions. When she asked me how I was doing, if I was happy, I'm like, that's a good question." And when you realize that you're not a good person, you're a thief, you're a crook, you're a thug, I've hurt a lot of people in my life. And sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes it's just a divergence of opinion and there's nothing much you can do about it. But back then it was 100% my fault. I was the problem. And when you're faced with that realization that you're not a good person, it's not a very pleasant one. Let's just put it that way. But throughout my life, if there's one thing I know, and looking through the Bible, it speaks about that too. If you're never going to learn, you're never going to want to change if everything's going well or if everything's going okay. You only change when you're really hitting rock bottom. And to me, pain and suffering are the greatest of teachers. And if you look at the Bible, this is one of the reasons why I love Christianity, is the message is all around hurting. Not purposely. God is not punishing you. But will he use pain to teach you something? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is, again, he ain't stupid.
Right.
He knows that we're the one that's stupid, and we only learn when we're really hurting, when doing the same thing over and over again is no longer an option, when you're hurting too much to continue doing what you're doing. This is when we're struck with the idea that, hey man, maybe I should do something different. Maybe it's time for me to start facing the type of individual that I am and get better, or at least try. or start somewhere.
Right.
So, and that was 20 years ago, 21 years ago, give or take, 20 years ago, let's call it that. And it's always something I have in the back of my head. And it's really interesting when you start taking accountability. It's a door that never closes, because it starts with, okay, I'm a drug addict, I'm a thug, I'm a thief, I'm not a good person. Then, okay, well, I'm going to stop doing that. You realize that you can't really surround yourself by those people anymore, because this is not the type of person you want to be. So you start cutting all those people off. Then when you start spending time alone away from people, you start realizing that, okay, this is who I am now. Maybe I need to do something to better myself. And I had 3 years of high school. I was never going to be employable at any type of job that would make sense. So then you're like, man, what can I do for that? Well, I'll go back to school. And then you're like, oh yeah, but a high school's not enough. Maybe I should go to college. Well, you go back to college, and then it happens that there's a gym there. And then I discovered the gym when I was there. And then you start realizing, you're like, wow, I was scrawny. I was 140 pounds on 6'1". Now I'm more like 210. So that tells you like there's a bit of a difference in size there. But those are all things this is what's amazing. And I've seen it time and time again, where you start changing one thing. And often when it comes to men, is taking control of their physique, of their bodies, like starting to hit the gym, starting to diet, really start treating your body more with the respect that it deserves. And everything starts, it's a domino effect. As soon as you start taking care of yourself and you stick to it, you start building discipline. You start realizing that you have a lot more control on your body than you think, that what you eat and the way you treat it has so much impact on the rest of your body, like your mind, for example. If you stop treating your body like like a dumpster, you'll stop thinking like garbage. And this is the beautiful thing, because I discovered the gym, then I was in school, then my mind was being developed. And then you realize that your brain works so much better when you take care of your body, when you give it the nutrients that it needs. Like, there's no wonder people don't feel good. We're talking about 42% of Americans are obese, when 30% of them are overweight. So it's about 28% of people are in acceptable shape. We're not talking hitting the gym for 5 times a week, dieting. We're just talking, okay, like acceptable. But there's more than it's insane. 72% of people are in bad physical shape. And you wonder, do you think they feel good in their bodies? Of course not.
No.
Of course not. They don't. There's no way. So imagine if you show them that they're capable of taking control of it, what their mind is gonna be able to produce a few months after. It's amazing. If you want to master yourself, start by mastering your body. Then you're gonna start mastering your mind. And after that, you can go after what your purpose is. You can start realizing the type of person that you actually are and what you're capable of. But until you start that, it's never going to happen.
Right. Well, so I went on that journey myself, lost 100 pounds, me and my wife. And you're right. I mean, once I was miserable. I just lacked. I just lived in a fog. But man, once I lost that weight. Started.
Yep.
I could buy clothes that I wanted to wear. You start feeling better about yourself, and then, well, man, now you can move too. I can do things. I can tie my shoes today. I was so big I couldn't even tie my own shoes. And everything.
What made you do it?
I was in a bad car wreck, and my back, and it was the only solution to, either I'm going to have back surgery or I need to lose weight, and it took me on a journey, that not really you think that you're ready for, but I'm happy because that was the start of real change happening in my life, and so it's been an incredible 3 years for me, but I kind of like what you said too, because then that's when purpose started coming into my life, and I see a lot of guys today. I don't know what you could do to encourage them, but I see a lot of guys who are just existing,
Mhm.
and sometimes trying to get that message across that, man, there's way more to life than just existing. What do you want out of your life? And I asked someone the other day, I was like, what goals you got? And they looked at me like and literally said, I've never been asked that before.
And does that surprise you?
No, not really,
Hmm.
but it encouraged me. Like, it gave me that opportunity to encourage this guy. Well, now somebody is. So
Mhm.
what's keeping you? And how do
You're,
you motivate? I know you're a coach and stuff. How do you
you
motivate people?
can't. You can't. Motivation's attached to emotions. Your emotions are fluctuating day in, day out. They're different. Multiple times a day, they're going to change. So, motivation is not meant to sustain you. Motivation can help, but it's never something that you're going to be able to accomplish anything on. You need to build discipline. Discipline is the only thing that's going to prevent you from, or that's going to force you to do things even though you don't feel like it. It might help you. You can go to a Tony Robbins seminar for the weekend. You're going to be pumped. For the next week, you're going to be pumped. But I guarantee you, within 2 weeks, you're demotivated because there's nobody else to pump you up. They do
Mm,
it on purpose. They have the lights, they have the show, they have the music that's pumping all the time. You're filled with caffeine. Everybody's hyped around you, but that doesn't stay. That's not motivate. That's motivation. That's not discipline. That's not what you need. So it's discipline. But the thing is you can't help somebody unless they're hurting. And your story, like mine, is the perfect example. Would you have changed if you never got injured? Probably not. Why? Because you didn't have to. We're lazy.
mhm.
Human being by nature are very lazy. We don't change unless we have to. We don't are even us as people, like as a species, we're not going to change unless we need to,
Right.
unless there's something that forces us to do it. If we're faced with death, we'll adapt. But outside of that, we're not going to change, and we're no different. So a guy like you were talking about, unless he's hurting, he's not going to change. And even if he's hurting, he probably won't change because he's not hurting enough.
Yeah.
This is
I
the
think
thing, and I
for
don't think
him,
there's nothing around it. You have to be hurting to a point where doing what you're doing right now is no longer an option.
yeah. Like for him, he's hurting, but I think when a lot of men haven't seen other role
100%.
models to
Hmm.
model that for them. And,
100%.
and so, how do you know something exists that you've never seen before? And
You know, there's it comes down to what I was saying earlier. It's accountability, because in this day and age, you cannot claim ignorance anymore. All the
mhm,
information you'll ever need is out there. So you're lazy. You're lazy. You're a coward. Maybe you're stupid. Like, call a spade a spade. People don't like to hear that, but this is a
right,
fact. This is a fact. If you open your eyes, you're going to start to see that there's no coincidences. That God has been trying to help you for years. You're just not listening.
yeah,
Who's to blame for this? You. If your life sucks, it's your fault. There's no way around it. It is what it is. If you're not happy, guess what? It's your fault.
mm,
Happiness is not a goal. It's the state of mind. You can choose to be happy right now if you want to.
yeah,
That's why the pursuit of happiness is such, to me, makes no sense. You don't have to chase after happiness. Happiness is a state of mind. When we're done here, I'm gonna go outside. Like, I've been up since 3 this morning. I've took a break to go to the gym, and now we're recording this. Once we're done, I'm gonna go sit outside with a Tim Keller book with a cigar. It's super nice out, and I'm gonna sit there with my dog. This to
yeah,
me is happiness.
yeah,
This right there, I choose to do this every time I can. You know why? Because it makes me happy. I
mm,
feel so much better when I'm just sitting in the sun with a book and a cigar, nobody to bother me. I don't care about the cell phone, and listen to some music, and I'm just there for an hour. This is
right,
happiness, but this is conscious. I go to the gym because it makes me happy. I go to the gym because it makes me feel better. Do I feel like doing it every day? Hell no. Hell no. Hell no. Do I still try to do it 4 to 6 times a week? 100%. Do I try to go outside by myself and read with my dog? Yes, 100%. But those are
well,
choices, right? And
yeah,
this is how it starts. We have this, we have this misconception that choosing to be happy is this massive enterprise that's going to be so hard and take so much time. No, it does not. I'm not in a good spot right now. I can tell you with all honesty, I'm not in a good spot right now. But you know what? Who cares? I have faith in God. I know He'll provide. I know I'm following what He's telling me to do. So I know that this is the right thing to do. Is it easy to follow your purpose, what God's chosen for you? No, it's very hard. I could have just stayed at my job. I was making six figures. I could have had a massive promotion that would have doubled my salary. And you know what? I wouldn't have had to worry. I could have invested, bought a few more houses, bought a few more cars, and just enjoy the rest of my life and live a lot. You know, I was posting this yesterday. You have two choices. Are you going to live a life of purpose or a life of regret?
Yep.
And if you're not living your purpose, I guarantee you're going to regret it, because this is the number one regret of the dying is to live a life others expected of them and not the life they wanted to live.
Yeah.
And I refuse to do that. Whatever the cost, it does not matter. If I have to lose it all, I've lost it all before and I'll rebuild it. If I have to lose it all again, no problem, I'll do it. But now I do it with purpose, knowing that that's what God wants me to do.
Man,
And there's so much strength in that, knowing that I can always rely on my faith. Is it easy? Hell no. Do I struggle with my faith sometimes? Absolutely. But you know what I've noticed? If you pay attention, God's spoken to me in church Sunday, not last Sunday, but the one before. I was demoralized that day. Like, you know, sometimes you wake up and you're like, oh man, it's one of those days that it was a hard day. I knew that I was off. Everything I was trying to put my mind to was not working. And I was in church, I was hurting, and I've learned to embrace my pain. I've learned to embrace it, to just say, you know what? Don't chase it away. Just accept that it's happening and let it be. Just let it be. There's a reason it's happening. Stop fighting it. So I let it be. I broke down like a little girl in church. For 20 minutes, I was crying. And you know why I cried? They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of joy. Because I closed my eyes as the preacher was talking, and I got in contact with God. God touched me. Literally, He was standing behind me and touched me. I didn't see Him, but I felt His touch on my head. And He told me I was never alone, no matter what. No matter what, I was never alone. You know, the father figure that we all say that God is? I've never understood it until then. I've said it. I'm like, yeah, of course He created us all, so He is our father. But it's more than that. If you don't have anybody in your life, He's going to be there for you. Yeah. And if you feel alone, if you don't have anybody to count to, if your friends are not, every time you change, if there's one thing I've learned in life, every single time you better yourself, you alienate everybody around you. If you're ready to say that I'm not a good person, guess what? Everybody that's around you right now ain't a good person either. And by you changing, you're basically shoving it into their face to say, you know, I'm changing. I'm not gonna deal with you anymore because you're not changing. I'm sorry, bro. I love you, but I love myself more. I have to take care of myself.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a lonely path. To follow God's purpose, I'm gonna tell you, it is a lonely path. But I realized a week ago that I'm never alone, that every single time I thought I never was. It was always there. And this is powerful, man. This is just what I needed on that day. I needed that. I needed God to show me something, because it is hard. But man, if you pay attention, if you have faith that you're doing the right thing, that you're listening, nothing can bring you down. It is freeing to have faith.
It is. And the payoff. I mean, you're talking the purpose, you know, intentional guy is the name of our podcast. And it was like, you know, I resonate a lot what you're saying, because until, you know, that word intentional hit me, is because I wasn't living my life, man. I was letting life lead me, and I was in a job I hated, and therefore I made everybody miserable around me. I had an excuse for everything, right? And then I don't know, just one day I realized, man, you choose to work here. You choose, you know, if you don't like this, then create something better to go after. And that awakening changed everything for me, and we became more purposeful and intentional in what I was doing. But what's amazing is as I took care of me and started being intentional in my life. I don't have any power to change my wife or my kids or anybody like that, but because I changed and because I was intentional, it bled over into them, and our family has grown together now in this. And now I'm really just all the stuff you're talking about. Like, I'm really people, places, and things. Those are so important to me. Those three things right there. I'm who I've got in my life, uh, where I'm spending my time and what I'm doing. Those things are so important. I used to teach at the prison, and I was the transition teacher, and that was one of the things I taught. And I was like, man, you're teaching these guys, but you're not even living it. You're miserable as anybody. I was in prison to myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the hard part is, and you said it. I'd asked an inmate one time because I was just frustrated. I was like, I'm here trying to help these guys. I was like, I go, man. He goes, Chestnut, when a man's ready for change? I was like, when he hits bottom, when he, and I had all these things, right? And he was like, no. He said, when he's ready to change and not a moment sooner. You can't, until the guy wants to change, there's nothing you can do.
But they're never going to change if they're not hurting enough. It always comes down to pain.
It does.
It always comes down to pain. When you cannot, it's simple. When you can't continue doing what you're doing right now, that's it. That's when you're going to change. You're not, and I agree with him, not a moment sooner. There's nothing I can tell you. I could smack you in the back of the head 10 times a day and say, you need to change. You're not going to listen to me. Yeah. You're going to get used to the pain because that's what we do until we can't take it anymore.
Yeah. Well, you said something earlier too. I want to backtrack to a little bit too, and have you define it a little bit for us. You said that I think every 3 months or so, every quarter, you reevaluate where you're at or something, or who you are.
But I do that all the time. I always try to do that. I'm a massive reader. Like, I'm a big fan of psychology, big fan of theology. I'm a big fan of philosophy. And this is something I do all the time. I'm always trying to be intentional the more that I can. Like, I really want to be intentional in everything that I do. It's not possible, obviously, but This is something that Buddhism has taught me. Like, I was into Buddhism for a very long time before I discovered Christianity, and through meditation, through being mindful of your action, being mindful of the way you feel. Like, why am I feeling a certain way right now? Why is my emotion changing? Most people don't even realize. They realize after they blew a gasket.
Right.
They don't realize until it's too far. It's too long. It's too late now. You've done what you shouldn't have done. But that's why meditation is so powerful. But then what's the difference between meditation and praying? Arguable.
Right.
The difference is very arguable. It's basically the same thing if you want it to be. But
I think you hit something earlier. It comes down to discipline. You have to discipline yourself. A lot of men don't want to change because they're comfortable, lazy, and they're fine with the status quo.
But that's why the comfort zone's so dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Because the comfort zone is exactly that. You might be in pain. Maybe just like you didn't like your job. Maybe you didn't feel good in your body. Maybe you didn't feel the best in your mind. But how did you know better? And this is what is tragic about this is you look at the rate of obesity, for example. They say that if the parent of a child are obese, there's 50% chances that kid will become obese if one of these parents. If the two of them are, it's something like 80 to 90%. So you're basically, as much as you can't choose the cards that you're dealt, like you can't choose your parents, the way you choose to play them is on you, is 100% on you.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you rather, can you get over this? Can somebody that's obese lose weight? Absolutely. But imagine that your parents taught you from a young age to eat properly. How far ahead you would be. It's a lot easier to learn the right thing the first time than to basically learn the wrong thing, do it for so long that you're addicted to that lifestyle, and then you have to retrain everything from scratch. From not even from scratch, from worse than zero. You're below where you should be. Imagine if there's one thing my mom taught me without realizing it is eating from home. We didn't have a lot of money, so all of our meals were at home.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't need restaurants, we didn't eat crap, and guess what? I've always been in shape. I've been pushed into sports when I was a super. I lived in the country. There's nothing much to do except playing outside.
Yeah.
So I've always been active my whole life, and I'm 41 years old, and I've been hitting the gym for more than 20 years now. Been doing martial arts for that long too. So, and I started playing basketball. I must have been 9, maybe 10. So this has always stayed with me. I have never been fat in my life, not once. That's because my parents pushed me into sports, or at least encouraged me, because I naturally went through it, but they encouraged it, and they fed me properly from a young age. That's what my mother did.
Hmm.
So right then and there, this is something that it will never change. You can chop something off, chop my 2 arms, I'll find a way to work out. I'll find a way to train. I'll find a way to do jiu-jitsu if I can do Muay Thai. I'll be able to do something. But this is the mindset. But again, I've pondered this question for so long, and I cannot bring somebody to be accountable. I used to do quite a bit of coaching with people to help them become accountable, and I stopped. I stopped dealing with them because they weren't worth my time. I do not deal with people. I will not coach people that are not already disciplined, that don't already have an idea of what they want, or at least who they are.
Well, how about if
Because
you got someone
man,
that's listening right now and they're like, how do I become disciplined? Where would you tell them to start?
start hitting the gym. This is the first thing. It takes 21 days to form a new habit. Start hitting the gym. Start just looking at what you're eating. Start really take a piece of paper out, a Word document, whatever, however you choose to take notes, and write down everything that you eat. Write down all the exercise that you're doing right now. Write down a schedule. How much time do you have every day? And you watching TV don't count. How much time do you have that's free, that you're not working or you're not taking care of your kids? How much time do you got? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You're going to take 4 1-hour sessions in that, and you're going to book them. You're going to put them in your calendar. I don't care that I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I have no pity for people that tells me that, oh, I don't have the time. Screw you. You don't make the time. There's a massive difference between both. Because I guarantee you, show me a schedule and I'll show you a bunch of time wasted somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody to tell me that you don't have 4 hours a week to take care to go to the gym, bull. You're telling me that you can't eat properly, bull. Don't believe it for a second. But those are the choices. If you're not capable of eating properly and hitting the gym 4 times a week, you'll never build discipline.
And
I
you're
don't
right.
believe it for a second.
A lot of people I deal with, I see excuses. I hear excuses more than I hear,
Of course.
Desires for something better. I mean, we all want something better, right?
Sure.
Of course, it's easy to want.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part is to go after and to make it into fruition. I mean, what do you want in life, and then you go after it and get it. And people of faith, we're the same way. I don't, just I get tired. I feel like sometimes Christians think that because we know Christ, that everything's just like, well, he should bless me with it. God wants us to work too. In fact,
You clearly don't know Christ if you think that he's going to bless you for something, for sitting your bum on the couch watching TV.
Yep.
Nobody. It's called free will.
Yep. Yep.
God did not invent evil. He allowed men free will. Free men created evil. Did God let it happen? Yes, because he had 2 choices. You either create us as free people, or you create us as automatons. Those are your 2 choices. And God can have all the plans in the world for you, but if you're not ready to do the work, guess what? You're gonna have a lot of explanation to do when you face him. And I was pondering this. I'm reading some Tim Keller right now, and I absolutely love this guy. And throughout his book, I started to realize that atheists, it's not that they don't believe in God. They don't want to believe in God. Because if God exists, that means you're accountable for a lot. You're going to have a lot of explanation to do. You have a lot of work to do every day if you want to be okay with a Christian God. It is not going to be easy. You're going to have to do a lot of work, my friend. And this is why I believe there's so many atheists today. Because if you look at every single problem in society today, I can boil it down to one thing: lack of accountability. There's no way that you want to believe in a God that expects things from you. Why? If you're not going to be accountable in your life, you don't want to believe in God. You don't.
Right.
If you think I'm harsh with my words, wait till you face him. Wait till you have you're going to have a lot of explanation, and you know what? It's not an easy feat. So I understand why there's so many atheists. Because it's a direct replication of what's going on in society with the lack of accountability. It goes hand to hand. Totally makes sense to me. That doesn't mean that Christians are necessarily good Christians either, though. We got to be very careful about that. And this is some of the work that I'm starting to do right now. This is something that I'm going to start talking about more and more, because I am not a Christian from life. I'm not a life Christian. I'm a new Christian from a year ago. And you know what? Christianity has gone soft. Yeah. We're extremely soft.
I grew up a preacher's kid. I had to undo everything I thought I knew and start from scratch. I really did. And so, I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like a brand new Christian in the last 3 years, because honestly, I was living what my dad and the church that I was in taught, and now I'm learning for myself some things, and my eyes are open on a lot of stuff, that they weren't before. And I think you bring up a lot of good points today: discipline, accountability, those are things that a lot of us lack, especially men.
100%.
And I agree with you in the simple fact, when all that happened to me was when I was hurting. When my world was miserable and I was miserable, that's when change finally took place for me.
Yep.
But
it's even more powerful than that. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to say it earlier, but you asked another question. But you said something that is so important, that any men listening to what you said really need to take your example with, really see it for the inspiration that it is. Because I don't even know if you realize this, but men are supposed to lead. This is our job. We follow God, and we're supposed to lead our families. We're supposed to lead our communities. We're supposed to be the leader they need. Not the person that we want to be, the leader that they need.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how you said that when you started to change, guess what? Your wife changed. Your kid changed, because that's your job. You're supposed to lead. You're a man. That is your job. You're supposed to lead your family. So you're asking me, you asked earlier, what could be the motivation for a man to want to change? Your family. Instead of using your family as an excuse, how about you start using it as a motivation?
Oh, yeah.
Instead of saying, I can't do this because I have kids. No. You have to do this because you have kids. You owe them more than you do. You're supposed to lead them. If you know what, you're responsible for how your kids are going to turn out. If you're not a good father, guess what? They're not going to be a good father either.
Yep.
They're going to have, as I said earlier, I don't see a difference between child abuse and obesity rates. I don't see the difference between child abuse and a father that doesn't take his responsibility of raising their kids. Yep. This to me is child abuse. You're creating an environment in which your kids are going to have to start further away than if you were present and doing your job.
Yeah.
And this is why what you said earlier is so powerful, because the day you start, you took your balls back and you reattached them to where they belong, you started leading, you started becoming a real man, you started leading, guess what? Your family fell into place. And not in a way where you're their master. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But you were the inspiration that they need.
Yeah.
Being a man is hard. Being a man is so hard when it comes to that, because we have gender roles. And for the people that think that there's no gender role, surprise, surprise, life is going to hit you like a shovel if that's what you truly believe.
No. And it's hard
because,
to be a man in today's world, because in today's world, God, don't even get me started. It's messed up.
But men are not courageous too. This is why, if you look at my 5 virtues of a good man, courage is the first one. Because I had this discussion with the pastor at my church here, where we are right now, and I asked him, I'm like, man, I'm writing my second book, and I don't know which one comes first. Is it courage or is it faith? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, that's a great question. I can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't know which one comes first. Because, for example, I've read C.S. Lewis. Now I'm reading Tim Keller. And I like Tim Keller better because he starts from more a messed up place. Like, if you read C.S. Lewis, you have the understanding that faith is more important than courage, because he was relating a Christian message to the boys in the First and the Second World War. Those guys are already courageous.
Yeah.
Already. This is already something that they have. Those guys were already protectors and providers for their families. If they weren't, they wouldn't be there in the first place.
Right.
So they started way ahead. As I said, they started like me when it comes to eating properly. When you look at, so C.S. Lewis didn't have to talk about courage, didn't have to talk about those simple things, because this was already understood. But if you look at Tim Keller setting up a church in the middle of Manhattan, it's insane. It's complete insanity to try to do that. Yet the Redeemer had like 5,000 or 6,000 people attending. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. So he's an inspiration, but he had to start way further down the line than a C.S. Lewis had to start. So this is why I asked that question to the pastor. I'm like, in today's world, where having faith takes courage, which one comes first? And it's courage, because men are not courageous anymore. Men have become so cowardly.
Yep.
We're cowards now. Men do not, and I'm not talking about saving a baby out of a burning building here, which you should. If you're faced with that situation, you should, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking like as simple as standing up for what you believe in.
Yep.
Just saying, when you're hearing somebody talk a lot of crap, and you're just like, no, absolutely not. I will not let you, 1, speak to me like this, and 2, you're wrong, and here is why you're wrong.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have what it takes to do that.
Well,
you're
you
supposed
can't
to be
have
courageous.
these debates today because people get so offended so easily over everything.
I have them every day,
And my thing is, I'm kind of, I know you're this way just by talking to you. I've got to the point where if they get offended, they get offended.
I quit my job.
Speak truth.
I quit my job because I knew that I wouldn't be able to speak the way I speak right now, being in sales and being one of the faces of the company. I couldn't have. I wouldn't have been able to. I quit my job because I did not like what they believed in. I quit my corporate job because my values did not align with theirs.
Yeah.
And I will I will not live my life on my knees. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
This is the first step to regret right there. Make sure that other people tell you what to do, and just listen and obey. You need to obey one single person, and he made you. Outside of that, you have to have the balls to know. We all know deep down what's right. I don't know how you call it. I haven't figured out what it's called, but God has put somewhat of a compass into us. We want to be good. Most of us do have a moral compass that has been genetically given to us. I don't know how it was provided to us, but all to say that we know what's right. In our heart, we know what's right. Yeah. Now, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So that doesn't mean that because we know what good is that we necessarily do it.
Do it.
But
Correct.
we need to be courageous again. Men need to step up to the plate and say, no, this is not wrong. I will stand up for it. And if you don't do it for you, do exactly what you did. Do it for your children. Do it for your wife.
Yeah.
Be the leader they need. Be the change you want to see in the world, as Gandhi said.
That's good. Well, listen, man, Nico, thank you so much for being on here. We're running out of time, but I really appreciate you giving us a lot of good stuff to look at. And, you know, iron sharpens iron. And, you know, I agree with a lot of things that you said on there, and starting with discipline. And, you know, for our men listening that's looking for that path to finding a better them, there's a great place to start right there. So thank you so much for being on our show, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man.
All right. Till next time, guys, just keep being intentional.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Intentional Guy Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and got some real value out of it. Tell others what you learned and share the podcast if you think they would benefit from it too. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and consider checking out our website, intentionalguy.org, to learn more about us and get in touch. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.